Angela Raina, Deputy Prime Minister, is she a champion of social housing or just another champagne socialist hypocrite? In this video, we'll look at what her policy to rip up Margaret Thatcher's right to buy scheme means for the housing market and also for us as property investors. So I love this sort of thing because I think Angela Raina is just a Class A hypocrite, but I'm joined to discuss this and deep dive into this subject with paid up member of the Angela Raina fan club, Andrew Roberts.
And I'm no hypocrite either. So, I'm glad you called Angela the hypocrite and not me on this occasion. Thank you.
But let's start by explaining what's going on here. Now, the right to buy policy was brought in by the late great Margaret Thatcher to encourage home ownership. Her vision was that Britain becomes a home owning democracy, where as many people who are able to can buy their own home. And what she allowed was for council houses to be sold off to their occupants so that they can achieve that home ownership dream. Now, I don't think there was anything wrong in that policy. I think there was something wrong in there wasn't a linked policy to build more social housing to replace those. But there was nothing wrong with this vision that people, if they want to own their own homes, they can do so. What's your take on that?
I don't get it. I really don't get it, because the right to buy is the right to buy your council home. Why would there need to be a linked policy to build more homes? Because if I live in the home and I've just bought the home, there's no new demand being created. The home is still there.
No, I think
what
I was trying to say was there's been a lot of criticism about Margaret Thatcher's right to buy policy, but I think there was nothing wrong with the policy. There's nothing to say, well, what is social housing need? And yes, we do need to build more. So the social housing stock just depleted. But that doesn't mean the right to buy policy was wrong.
No, but my point is, I was in the social housing marketplace. I'm now no longer creating a demand in social housing because I own my own home. Therefore, the demand is reducing as home ownership increases.
Okay, we're now drifting off the topic here, but hang on a second.
Sorry.
There are more people in the social housing pool, but their demand is not being catered for. But anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. I think the area that we want to really explore here is that this has been a policy since the 1980s. It's helped thousands and thousands of people achieve that home ownership status. The thing is, the Deputy Prime Minister benefited from this policy herself. She herself was a council house tenant. She used Margaret Thatcher's policy to buy her own council home. She later on sold it. I think she had sublet it or something like that. But there was a capital gains tax liability, and there was all sorts of hoo-ha about whether she paid a capital gains tax on that, which was a scandal early on in the year. But she benefited from this policy, and now she's saying, now she's in power, Deputy Prime Minister of this socialist government. She wants to say, well, no one else can do that.
Well, isn't that what you'd expect of a Labour government? Pull the drawbridge up, last one out, turn the lights off, guys. No, I mean, for me, reading through the policy, what is being proposed is they will still allow it, but you won't get as big a discount. You have to live there longer, and when you come to sell it, you have to wait longer before you can sell it. So, as a property strategy, if you were to go and get yourself a council house, you can no longer buy it and flip it quickly for quick profit like Angela Raina.
Yes and no. I think we'll have to see how they tailor these agreements, but a great strategy during the 90s and early 2000s was to actually leaflet bomb council housing estates. And you're looking for people who meet the criteria to buy their council home. And that usually means they have to have lived in it for a few years. And then what you do is encourage them to exercise that, because they would be getting massive discounts, sometimes as much as 50% discounts in certain circumstances. And then what the investor would do was basically do a lease option with them. So because the way the council sells you the home, you're not allowed to resell it for a fixed period of time.
Yeah.
So that might be 5 years or so. So you basically have that option to purchase at a time when the council tenant is able to basically flip it on. And people made a huge amount of money doing that. And that's why a lot of council houses did end up in buy-to-let investors' hands, people that are adopting that strategy. And I think this is something that she will probably look to curtail.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think that's a fair and reasonable thing to do. However,
What, leaflet bomb council housing estates?
Well, that as well, yes. No, I think it's fair and reasonable to try and prevent the housing market being distorted by unfair or malicious strategies.
Well, malicious. I thought they were very
Creative.
opportunistic and creative strategies, actually. But perfectly legal strategies.
Well, they were legal until 2005 when they were outlawed.
Yeah, of course. I did say 1990s and 2000s. But this is what I always say. Sometimes the best opportunities are there, and it doesn't mean that they're there forever.
No.
Andrew and I run the Baker Street Property Meet. We have 300 people a month join us for our monthly networking events. And there you get to meet with people that are actually in the trenches doing stuff. And it's at those meetings that you pick up strategies which work now. And just because they work now, it doesn't mean they're going to work in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, 5 years' time, because we regularly see the more people that get involved in certain stuff, regulation gets in the way. So to stay ahead of the curve, join us at the Baker Street Property Meet. The details of the next meet are on the screen below.
So, Ranjan, to me, I'm looking at this and I can see the logic. Actually, I can see the logic in a government policy, a Labour government policy. The logic here is you sell a council house at a discount. They then want to replace it by building new. But they've got less money because building houses is not cheap. I mean, in another one of our news stories, you will have seen how different councils are stopping building houses because it's not economic to do. So I can understand why they want to stop selling them and stop the discounts or reduce the discounts when they sell them, because it's not financial sense to provide social housing. Therefore, I can put a tick in a box and say, actually, that is one policy I would agree with. What I don't agree with, though, is the additional rules that they're putting around all of this, and the fact that one person can take benefit of it, but then the rest of the country can't take benefit. I think that's a bit unfair. So to me, yeah, I'm in the camp of reduce the discount and try and discourage the purchase of a council home. Go and buy a house in a different area.
I think that I have to disagree, actually. I think it all depends on what the objective is. And I agree with Margaret Thatcher's objective, which was to make sure that as many people as possible had a stake in the capitalist system, because that's the way a capitalist democracy actually functions, if more people have a stake in it. And to encourage that is a good thing. And you've got to remember that social housing is built. The best way to build social housing is in the way that these buildings were originally built, which is financed by government debt, which of course is much cheaper than private sector debt. They've got the economies of scale, they've got land purchase and all of that, and obviously easier planning and that kind of stuff to get the things through. So their costs should be, in theory, much lower to deliver housing than the private sector. So the government is not out there to make a profit. So if we are in a capitalist system, a capitalist democracy, then the direction of travel should be to encourage the maximum number of people to have a stake in that. If the direction of travel to have a socialist utopia where you own nothing and you will be happy, then to commit people to being lifetime tenant serfs is the policy of that sort of government that wants that sort of outcome. So it depends what your vision is for the country, as a government, and that dictates which path you're going to take.
I never knew you were so generous, Ranjan. I mean, Ranjan, if you come down to the bakerstreetpropertymeet.com, Ranjan will get his checkbook out because he's currently paying to subsidise all of these council houses with the tax that he pays, and he will write you a cheque for a discount on your next buy-to-let property. I think that's so generous of you, Ranjan.
I don't know where you got that one from. You'll have to rewind this video to see exactly where I said that. But I think there is a little bit of politics there. Now, of course, people have exercised their right to buy. They've bought their own council house. Sooner or later, they decide to move on from that council house, and a lot of these properties do end up in the hands of buy-to-let investors. And I think there's a reason for that, because I think, first of all, the capital value of a council house is usually less than one that isn't a council house in the neighbouring side street. But the rent is exactly the same. The rent levels are exactly the same. And council houses, particularly the ones that were built before the 1980s, tended to be quite generously proportioned in terms of size. So you get a lot of bang for your buck, and the yields look particularly good. So that's why I think they've been very, very attractive to a lot of buy-to-let investors.
No, they absolutely are. And they are also tend to be very well built. If you buy one of those ex-council houses post-war era, you find they're very hard to knock about and do works on, so they were well constructed. Whether it was they were expecting more bombs coming overhead, so they built them strong, or whether it was just they had better builders back in the day.
But the comment I just made really applies to freehold council houses. Council flats have been, I think, notoriously bad. And I'd love to know your comments below on this one. And that's because of the service charges. Councils are exempt from the leasehold reform legislation and all those changes that government are bringing on private sector freeholders, so they can do what they want. And what I've found, particularly in socialist Labour councils, who begrudgingly have given people the right to buy. So, you maybe have a council flat which is you own privately, and it's in a block of 20, say, and only 30% are private. They really sting you with charges. They make people pay. You dared to exercise your right to buy, we're going to punish you and you are going to pay. And guess what? Everyone knows that it costs the public sector 10 times more to change a light bulb than doing it in the private sector, and you pay in the service charges. So I don't think leasehold properties have been a good buy-to-let investment for our community, and they've also been pretty bad for owner-occupiers. When people exercise their right to buy on a leasehold property, they're often stuffed with those service charges as well. So freehold ones are the ones to go for.
Absolutely, and also take note, some councils, for example Birmingham, has a lot of 999-year leases in their houses, so be careful what you buy. Read the details of the lease. RTBL, read the bloody lease. So on that note, Ranjan is bringing his checkbook along to the next bakerstreetpropertymeet.com to help fund your next buy-to-let investment. So join us there.